I'm Peter Stoett. There's no doubt that climate change has emerged as the primary environmental issue of our time, or perhaps of any time. I'm often asked by students and others whether I tap into the general anxiety on the topic, and I certainly do. It's a scientific reality and a public policy challenge that I and many others live with on a daily basis, and I have 3 wonderful children who will all inherit more carbon trouble than they could ever cause. Any parent who has thought seriously about planetary futures knows exactly what I mean. And it's infuriating when climate change denial clouds the issues. I spent much of last year living in Washington, D.C., where climate change denial is alive and well, and surfaces in some unlikely places. At the same time, much of my professional work and teaching has been on the equally troublesome human rights field. When climate change intersects with human rights concerns, we generally get what is commonly referred to as the climate justice issue. This is certainly not a bad thing. It is fundamentally unjust that those who have contributed the least to global warming will end up paying the steepest prices in terms of livelihood, displacement, and health threats. Climate justice demands that we compensate, that indigenous peoples and small island dwellers, to name just 2 examples, are not disposed of in our mind's eye as mere casualties of climate change. While it's high time that China, India, Brazil, and other rapidly developing states make firm commitments to emissions reductions, it remains understandable that southern countries want to benefit from whatever funding climate change adaptation programs can provide. Here comes the dreaded however. There are a few caveats I would like to stress as we move into the theater of hard choices regarding climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies and policies, and as they relate to human rights in particular. First of all, we should not let climate change overshadow all the other environmental issues that have for so long formed part of the struggle for social justice. While carbon and methane emissions exacerbate these problems, they would not go away even if we had 0 emissions. I refer specifically to the toxic waste trade, to plastics polluting our oceans and lakes, to overfishing, to species loss, to land degradation, to invasive alien species, pesticide and herbicide poisonings, and many other ecological nightmares that have a disproportionate impact on the poor. They are all part of a positive feedback loop with climate change, no doubt. One exacerbates the other, but they would exist on their own. They're worthy of study and remediation, and climate cannot become the only game in town. Secondly, our efforts to stem climate change will fail if they lack legitimacy in places where global policies are applied. There is a tired history of sacrificing local livelihoods and cultural traditions and even access to traditional lands in the name of Western conservation ideals and policies. This can be viewed within the prism of colonial dominance as easily as it can be seen as environmentalism gone awry. REDD+, the CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, and other market mechanisms which place value on carbon emission avoidance must be applied with the utmost care for the social impact of conservation projects and new work projects, or they will lack the legitimacy that they need in the eyes of the people that they affect on a day-to-day basis, regardless of how much carbon they supposedly restrain from the atmosphere. They must integrate labor rights and other factors, and not be seen merely as another form of carbon colonialism preserving the Western standard of living. They are already failing due to the low price of carbon on a largely fictional market. Recent concerns about their human rights implications make them even easier targets for the naysayers. We can fix this before Paris in 2015, but we need strong leadership and open, critical reflection. Thirdly, there will be a convenient opportunity to conflate climate change adaptation funding with current development assistance. In fact, arguably, the Conservative government has already done this in reverse, exaggerating its claims to adaptation funding by including funds preset for development. The emerging 2015 Sustainable Development Goals will not be met if climate funding devours all other forms of assistance. Adaptation funding must be additional funding, and this will be a hard sale in Ottawa and elsewhere. And let's not forget that so-called climate proofing, from the further development of drought-resistant seeds to seed defenses, is a new profit frontier for Western technology providers. This is not a bad thing in itself. We have the technology, let's develop it, let's use it and share it. But encasing the adaptation agenda, and clearly we have moved on to an adaptation agenda, in addition to the mitigation measures we need, within the corporate approach overlooks the resilient nature of local methods of adaptation, carrying forth the narrative of Western salvation from indigenous ignorance in the face of change. Finally, the tendency to blame climate change on everything should certainly be resisted. While droughts and floods may exacerbate social tensions, extreme inequality, pathological terrorism, local demagogues, foreign policy adventurism, corporations bent on selling weapons, and other factors are the real igniters of human violence. So while we should certainly keep exploring the links between climate change, resource scarcity, and mass violence, this should not let anyone responsible for war crimes or profiteering off the hook. Whether we can extend international criminal law to include environmental crimes is a complicated issue. It's an issue I'm working on, and I hope many others are, and we're moving in that direction, but that will be a slow and tortuous process. In the end, we are all responsible for climate change, some of us more than others. We're all responsible for climate justice. But we also have an obligation to promote and protect human rights, which is a Canadian principle. And alongside climate justice, we should not let one imperative trump the other, but advance them both in the challenging century before us. Thank you.